Hello, everybody. You're reading with Jimmy. We're reading the entire story of Guy de Maupassant's The Horla. This is part one of 4 parts of the reading. Please join me when we're done with this for parts 2, 3, and 4. The Horla. What a glorious day! May 8th. I spent the whole morning stretched out in the grass in front of my house under the huge plane tree which covers it completely, giving it shelter and shade. I love this part of the country, and I love living here because it is here that I have my roots, those deep and delicate roots which bind a man to the soil where his forefathers were born and died, bind him to ways of thinking and eating, to local customs, dishes, turns of phrase, to the intonations of the peasants' voices, to the smells of the villages, of the earth, of the very air. I love this house of mine where I grew up. From my windows, I can see the Seine flowing alongside my garden, beyond the main road, almost through my house, the great wide Seine, which goes from Rouen to Le Havre, covered with passing boats. Over to the left is Rouen, a vast city of blue roofs lying beneath a bristling host of Gothic belfries. They are beyond number, these belfries, slender or sturdy, dominated by the cathedral's iron steeple and filled with bells which ring out in the limpid air of the fine morning, sending me the sweet, distant hum of their iron tongues, a brazen song borne to me by the breeze, louder or fainter as it swells or dies away. How delightful everything was this morning. About 11 o'clock, a long line of boats passed my gate, drawn by a pint-sized tug which panted with the effort and vomited thick clouds of smoke. After a couple of English schooners, their red flags, their red flags, fluttering in the against the sky, came a splendid Brazilian three-master, all white, gleaming, spotlessly clean. The sight of this boat gave me such pleasure that for some unknown reason I saluted her. May 12th. I've had a touch of fever for the last few days. I feel unwell, or rather I feel sad. Where do they come from, these mysterious influences which turn our happiness into gloom, or our self-assurance into distress? It's as if the air, the invisible air, were full of unfathomable powers whose mysterious proximity affects us. I wake up full of high spirits with a longing to sing bubbling in my throat. Why? I go for a stroll by the river, and after walking a little way, I suddenly turn back feeling miserable, as if some misfortune were waiting for me at home. Why? Has some cold shiver passing over my skin shaken my nerves and saddened my soul? Has the shape of the clouds or the color of the day, that ever-changing color of things, troubled my thoughts as it passed through my eyes? Who can tell? Everything about us, everything we see without looking at it, everything we brush past without knowing it, everything we touch without feeling it, everything we meet without noticing it, has swift, surprising, and inexplicable effects on us, on our senses, and through them on our ideas and our very hearts. How profound it is, the mystery of the invisible. We cannot fathom it with our wretched senses, with our eyes which can perceive neither what is too small nor what is too big, neither what is too close nor what is too distant, neither the inhabitants of a star nor the inhabitants of a drop of water. Or our ears, which deceive us by transmitting vibrations of the air to us as sonorous notes, for they are fairies which work the miracle of changing the movement into sound, and through that metaphysical metamorphosis give birth to music, which turns the mute agitation of nature into song. Or with the sense of smell, which is feebler than any dog, or with our taste, which can barely detect the age of wine. Oh, if only we had other senses which could work other miracles on our behalf, how many more things we could discover around us. May 16th. I'm ill, that's certain. I have a fever, an atrocious fever, or rather, a feverish weakness which afflicts my mind just as much as my body. All the time I have this terrible feeling of imminent danger, this apprehension of impending misfortune, of approaching death, this presentiment, which is doubtless the first sign of some disease as yet unknown, germinating in my blood and my flesh. May 18th. I've just been to see the doctor, for I couldn't sleep anymore. He found my pulse was rapid, my pupils dilated, and my nerves were on edge. But I had no symptoms of an alarming nature. I have to take showers and drink bromide of potassium. May 25th. No change. My condition is really very strange. As evening draws on, an incomprehensible uneasiness comes over me, as if the darkness held some dreadful threat for me. I dine hurriedly, and then I try to read, but I can't understand the words. I can scarcely make out the letters. So then I pace up and down my drawing room in the grip of a vague and irresistible fear, a fear of sleep and fear of my bed. About 2:00, I go to my room. I'm no sooner inside than I double lock the door and I shoot the bolts. I'm afraid. But of what? I was never afraid of anything before. I open my wardrobes, I look under the bed, and I listen. I listen to what? Isn't it strange? Isn't it strange that a slight indisposition, a disorder of the circulation perhaps, or an irritation of the nerves, a little congestion, a small disturbance in the delicate, imperfect functioning of the human machine, can make a melancholic of the happiest of men or a coward of the bravest? So then I go to bed and I wait for sleep, as if I were waiting for the executioner. I wait for it in terror of its coming, with my heart pounding and my legs trembling. My whole body shivers in the warmth of the bedclothes, till the moment when I suddenly fall asleep like a man falling into a chasm full of stagnant water to drown. Nowadays, I no longer feel the approach of this perfidious sleep, lurking near me, watching me, waiting to seize me by the head, close my eyes, and annihilate me. I sleep for a long time, 2-3 hours, and then a nightmare takes hold of me. I'm fully aware that I'm in bed and asleep, and I feel it, and I know it. And I also feel somebody approach me, look at me, touch me, climb onto my bed, touch me, kneel on my chest, take my neck between his hands, and squeeze with all his strength, trying to strangle me. For my part, I struggle madly, hampered by that terrible helplessness that paralyzes us in dreams. I try to cry out. I can't. I try to move. I can't. Gasping for breath and making frantic efforts, I try to turn over to throw off this creature who's crushing me and choking me. I can't. And suddenly I wake up panic-stricken, bathed in sweat. I light a candle. I'm alone. After this nightmare, which is repeated every night, I finally fall into a peaceful sleep which lasts until dawn. June 2nd. My condition has grown worse than ever. What can be the matter with me? The bromide is useless. The showers are useless. Just now, to tire out a body already exhausted, I went for a walk in the Romero forest. At first, I thought that the fresh air, the clean, mild air, full of the scent of leaves and grass, was pouring new blood into my veins, new energy into my heart. I set off down the boardwalk, and then I turned towards La Boleo, down a narrow walk between two ranks of tremendously tall trees. which stretched a thick row of an almost black green between the sky and me. And then a shiver suddenly ran through me. Not a shiver of cold, but a strange shiver of fear. I quickened my pace, easy at being alone, uneasy at being alone in this wood, foolishly frightened for no reason by the profound solitude. And then all of a sudden, it seemed to me that I was being followed, that somebody was hard on my heels, very close, near enough to touch me. I swung around. I was alone. I could see nothing behind me but the long, straight walk, empty, high, terrifyingly empty. And in front of me, too, it stretched away as far as the eyes could see, the same in every direction, and just as frightening. I shut my eyes. I don't know why. And I started spinning around on one heel very fast like a top, and I almost fell. I opened my eyes again, and the trees were dancing, the earth was swaying, and I was forced to sit down. But now I didn't know which way I'd come. How odd. How very odd. I had no idea, absolutely. I set off down toward the right and eventually found myself back in the avenue which had taken me into the middle of the forest. June 3rd. Last night was terrible. I'm going to go away for a few weeks. A short holiday will probably put me right. July 2nd. Home again, and I'm completely cured. Completely cured. What is more, I've had a delightful holiday. I visited Mount St. Michael, which I had never seen before. What a splendid sight meets your eyes when you arrive at Arverches, and I did about dusk. The town stands on a hill, and I was taken into a municipal park on the outskirts. I uttered a cry of astonishment. An immense bay lay stretched out before me as far as the eye could see, between two widely separated coasts which disappear into the far-off mists. And in the middle of this vast yellow bay, under a pale golden sky, a strange hill, dark and pointed, rose from the sands. The sun had just disappeared, and silhouetted behind against the horizon, still ablaze with fire. That was a fantastic rock, bearing no less fantastic monument on its summit. At dawn, I went out to see it. The tide was out, as it had been the previous evening, and I saw the astonishing abbey grow in height before my eyes as I drew closer to it. After walking for several hours, I reached a huge pile of rocks which bears the little city dominated by the great church. Climbing the steep, narrow street, I entered the most wonderful Gothic dwelling made for God on this earth, a building as vast as a town, full of low rooms under oppressive ceilings, lofty galleries supported by frail pillars. I entered that gigantic granite jewel, which is as delicate as a piece of lacework, thronged with towers and slender belfries pierced by spiral staircases, towers and belfries which thrust into the blue sky of day and the black sky of night, these strange heads bristling with chimras, devils, fantastic beasts, monstrous flowers, and which are linked together by carved arches of intricate design. And when I reached the top, I said to the monk accompanying me, "Father, what a wonderful place this is." "The winds are very strong," he replied. And we started chatting together as we watched the tide coming in, sweeping across the sands and covering them with steel armor. The monk told me a great many stories, all the stories of that place, legends, and still more legends. One of them impressed me enormously. The local inhabitants, the people who live on the mount, claim to hear voices at night on the sands, followed by the sound of two goats, one bleating loudly and the other softly. Skeptics insist that what they hear is the screeching of the gulls. which sometimes sounds like bleating and sometimes like the wail of human voices. But fishermen, returning late at night, swear that between one tide and the next, near the little town cut off from the world, they have met an old shepherd wandering on the dunes. No one has ever seen his head, which is hidden by his cloak. But he leads behind him a goat with the face of a man and a she-goat with the face of a woman, both of them with long, wide hair and constantly talking orally in an unknown tongue, and then suddenly breaking off to bleat at the tops of their voices. I asked the monk, do you believe that story? I don't know, he murmured. If, I went on, there existed on this earth creatures other than ourselves, how could we have failed to know of their existence long ago? Why haven't you seen them? Why haven't I seen them myself? He replied, do we see 100,000 part of all that exists? Take the wind. For instance, the greatest force in nature, which knocks down men, blows down buildings, uproots trees, and whips up the sea into watery mountains and destroys cliffs and hurls great ships on the reefs. The wind, which kills, whistles, groans, and roars. Have you seen it? Can you see it? And yet it exists. Tune in for part 2 of the story, The Horla. We'll be reading it shortly. Thanks for visiting. This is Jimmy. You're reading with Jimmy. My email is jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com, jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com, and I'll see you for part 2 of The Horla.